In this video, we will talk about simplifying a rational expression. The first step is completely factor the numerator and denominator of the rational expression. Step 2, divide out the common factors. Here's an example. Let's simplify the rational expression 3x minus 12 over 5x minus 20. Now to factor 3x minus 12, we must take out the greatest common factor, which is 3. We're left with 3 times the quantity, x minus 4. X minus 4 cannot be factored any further. With 5x minus 20, the greatest common factor is 5. We're once again left with the expression x minus 4. Since x minus 4 divided by x minus 4 is 1, we will divide out the common factor, and our answer would be 3/5. Here's another example. Let's simplify this given expression. So with the numerator, to factor, we first take out the greatest common factor. Between 5, 13, and 6, the greatest common factor is 1, so we don't have to take that out. But between x cubed, x squared, and x, our greatest common factor is x. This leaves us with 5x to the second power minus 13x minus 6 on the numerator. On the denominator, the greatest common factor here is again an x, and this leaves us with x squared plus x minus 12. Now our task will be to factor the numerator and factor the denominator even further. Since the coefficient of the x squared is not equal to 1, we will have to use the x factor method. And when we use the x factor method, we should get 5x plus 2 times x minus 3 as the factored form of 5x squared minus 13x minus 6. And since we've done that many times, I will skip those steps. On the denominator, the coefficient of x squared is 1, so that'll simply be x plus 4 times x minus 3. We find two terms that multiply to be negative 12, add up to be 1, which are 4 and negative 3. Don't forget, the greatest common factor, x, must be written on the outside. Now, let's divide out the common factors. We have an x minus 3, which divide. We have an x over x, that's also 1, so that divides. And all we're left with is 5x plus 2 over x plus 4. Okay, let's do one more example. Let's simplify 4x squared minus 36x over 9 minus x. 4x squared minus 36x, the greatest common factor between 4 and 36 is 4. Between x squared and x is going to be x. If we divide 4x squared by 4x, we're left with x. Negative 36 divided by 4x, we're left with a negative 9. Now on the denominator, we have 9 minus x. Remember that we always want the leading coefficient to be positive. So in this case, we want this x to be a positive x. For that to happen, we're going to use a little trick. We're going to factor out a negative 1 from the denominator. So just like on the numerator, I factored out a 4x. That was my greatest common factor. So I wrote the 4x on the outside. I'm going to do the exact same thing, except now I want to factor out a negative 1 in order to make that x positive. So I write the negative 1. And now to figure out what's left over inside the parentheses, I will divide the 9 by negative 1 and the x negative x by negative 1, since that's what I'm factoring out as my GCF. So 9 divided by negative 1 is negative 9. Negative x divided by negative 1 is positive x. That gives us x minus 9. If you distribute this, negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative 1 times negative 9 is positive 9. So this is the same exact expression as 9 minus x, but written with the negative 1 factored out. So anytime you want to make the leading coefficient positive, you simply factor out a negative 1. Now the x minus 9 over x minus 9 is the common factor, which means we're left with 4x divided by negative 1. Remember that a positive divided by negative is a negative, so 4x divided by negative 1 is simply negative 4x.